بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome to our classes on the book of knowledge of Imam Al-Ghazali from the Ihya Ulumuddin. Last time, just a quick reminder that we talked about, we concluded some of these terms that the meanings have been changed. But we, in particular, we talked about the terminologies, or more importantly, theology, how could we put it? The challenges of today that have differed amongst the scholars and so forth. And let's have a look. I'll bring it up from last week. And we finished with the saying of Imam Sufyan ibn Thawri, just to the end, and that was that if you see a scholar with a lot of following, then know that he's a fake, because if he was to speak the truth, then he wouldn't have many friends around him. So this was the thing, that scholarship in that day and age had become something of a fame and lacked sincerity and so forth. And Imam Ghazali was trying to push or guide himself, in a sense, and others around him, and he did become sincere, and hence his legacy lives on by the permission of Allah, but others as well, and he saw that in his time, rahimahullah ta'ala. So the section we're on today, and the topic of today is, what is it that we have to learn? What is it that we have to acquire in terms of knowledge as Muslims? And so this is the actual section in the book of knowledge that talks about this ruling, really, for every single Muslim. So this is very important for everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, to be honest. If we believe in this as the truth, then this is for everyone. So Imam Ghazali, first of all, in this section, he starts off by categorizing knowledge in terms of, again, praiseworthy and blameworthy, in respect of how much to study, right? So he says there's just three categories he mentions. Number one, whether you study a small amount or a large amount, it's praiseworthy. This whole knowledge that you're going to acquire and learn about is praiseworthy. Second category, he says, whether you study a little or a lot, it's all blameworthy. It's all bad knowledge. It's all has a negative impact on you and doesn't bring you any benefit. And the third category he mentions is that within itself has three levels. So there's an essential level, or a sufficient level, actually he calls it, a sufficient amount, which is good. Then there's in middle kind of amount, which is praiseworthy. It's still good, and it's worth studying and has a benefit. And then there's an excess or extra study, going into more deep study and detailed study, which is not praiseworthy. And this, of course, refers to us as the masses, as not referring to an individual, but everyone in general. Imam Ghazali is talking about. So the first one, Imam Ghazali himself likens, without giving examples of what it exactly is. He gives, first of all, examples of something that we can relate to. So he says, that which is praiseworthy, all of it, is like, he gives the example of the human body, and he says, it's like having good health. There's no limit to how much good health you can have or how much beauty you can have, right? Good health and husn, beauty. And that which everything is blameworthy of it, to learn it, he mentions, is like the example of qubh, which is ugliness, and bad character, right? So, whatever there is of that, it's all bad, it's all evil. And then he gives the example of the amount of knowledge, or the category of knowledge in terms of amount studied, which is either, has three levels: a sufficient amount, a good amount, and then a blameworthy, excessive amount. So it needs a balance. And he mentions it to be spending wealth. There's a certain amount you have to spend, it's obligatory and it's good. Then there's a praiseworthy amount that, is generosity comes in, right? And, kindness and so forth. But then there's also being extravagant and, wasting wealth, squandering wealth, as they say, and being a spendthrift, right? And not realizing that you're wasting your money. He gives another example of courage. There's a certain level that is required for all of us, a level of, bravery. And then obviously there's a high level of bravery which you see in certain individuals. But then that can become tahawwur, he calls it, which is like suicidal or, reckless, maybe better, that you don't think about your life and your well-being. You think you're brave, but you're not. You're being reckless and going beyond the limits. And it's not bravery anymore, right? It's not what you should be doing. So this is just some examples he gives with regard to those three categories from real life or real life metaphors. But then he actually goes and mentions the things that fit in those categories. So what is it that we must learn, which all of it is praiseworthy and all of it is good, and therefore we should not stop to learn it and always put our efforts into learning that. He mentions it is the knowledge of Allah, His attributes, His actions, Allah's actions, af'al Allah, His sunan, we talked about this before, the sunnah of Allah in creation, the way Allah, the patterns of Allah in creation, His wisdoms and just one of the things Imam Ghazali mentions is why He made this world the precursor to the next world, right? This tartib of the dunya first and the akhirah second, this order of the world and the next world. I'm trying to figure it all out, trying to learn about life and our journey basically to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It says, this is knowledge sought for itself and by which one may attain eternal happiness, sa'ada, right? This felicity and good fortune in the next life. To spend one's decreed time in utmost endeavor to obtain this knowledge is to fall short of getting to this knowledge. In other words, you could never spend enough time learning this knowledge. Every moment spent in this is worth it, basically. It is like a big ocean. There is no bottom to it, right? There's no seabed. As much as they can, the thirsty hover around its shores and extremities. Only the prophets, the well-grounded people in knowledge, the saints, the awliya, enter deeply into the depths of this ocean. Obviously, it's all based on, as he mentions here, the preparation one has to attain that knowledge. It's not necessarily knowledge which we can read and find in books. It says, learning and seeing the circumstances of the otherworldly things. Learning and seeing the circumstances of the otherworldly things. So seeing them would be, kashf or, openings, which we talked about previously. So again, there's an element of learning and practice, but there's an element of openings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence the prophets and mentioned there that they have that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says it's based on the quwwah, the power, and the sort of preparation, how recipient you are prepared to take on these openings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's linked to your devotion, your mujahada, your struggle. And he says that mujahada is the miftah, the key to opening to hidayah, to guidance. But he mentions a very important point here. He says it's all decreed, and it is all decreed, but we must still try hard, because whatever is decreed is only decreed through hard work. So if you're not doing any hard work, nothing's decreed for you. If you're doing hard work, you'll get there. You're on the path. That's a sign for you. There's openings to come, and there's much more understanding. So really what he's trying to tell you is there's a struggle, right? There's mujahada, ijtihad. There has to be a part of this journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not mere knowledge here, just, theoretical knowledge or reading a book. Struggle is the key to the path, right? And this is the key, is what you need to open the doorways, right? So that's the first category, is all blessed and good, right? So that's just a quick, oversight of that. The second category, which is all bad and evil, we've talked about it before, and we need to go into too much detail here. It's all ugly, all evil, as Imam Ghazali says, and that is things like black magic, talismans that are no good, astrology, and learning this has no benefit for us or anybody else. It in and of itself, this is just harm for everyone, and there's no benefit whatsoever. So it's best avoided, and it's haram to actually study, therefore. So that knowledge should be avoided. So anything like that now, today, right? And I'll be very careful about what we study today, because, in today's day and age, and it's really important, I mean, we're in this topic, so we need to discuss it, but actually the whole concept of acquiring knowledge is something very strange today. What is acquiring knowledge now, right? Is it reading books? Is it watching YouTube videos? Everyone at home is watching, right? Is it Facebook? Is it, university essays that we take everything from? What is knowledge now? Where do we get it from? And what is it classified as actual knowledge? That's really the question. What is ilm, basically? Because this is what the prophets left behind. Warathul ilm, they bequeathed knowledge. So the really important point here is that is not, as we've had before so many times, we mentioned it, it's not kathratul riwayat, as Imam or Abdullah ibn Mas'ud who said, it's not amassing narrations or many narrations. Those if you look at it from the flip side, we probably have access to more narrations and more understanding and more discourse on everything in Islam than the early Muslims ever did. But does that make us more knowledgeable than them? Right? Do we have more knowledge than them? More, real understanding of this religion than they ever had? Right? So the information is not the key. Right? So even if you go to the hadith, the Sahaba and the first generations had access to a large corpus of the hadith, but maybe to 90%, maybe some had to 80%, and that's how they practice their religion, on that limited amount of access. And that's true, that it could be the case. And we may have access to 99.9%, on if we really research 100%. The books are there now, it's all recorded, there's nothing left to discover. There may be some manuscripts hidden here and there, but we've got majority of it. We've got access to the information, but is that the knowledge that we now have to make better decisions and be more well informed, etc.? No, it's not. Because knowledge is something different to just information, or, like we said, kathratul riwayat. In that hadith, it says it's a light that Allah places in the heart, but really what it is a connection to the source of knowledge. Right? You don't get knowledge by simply reading a book. You don't get knowledge by simply listening to a talk. Knowledge is acquired by sitting with people of knowledge. And that's any subject, by the way, whether we're talking about Islamic knowledge or otherwise, right? So this is why it's very careful we look at this whole idea of now acquiring knowledge in the 21st century. Where are we acquiring it from? Who are we sitting with? What kind of, not just knowledge or information people are putting into us, but, ideology, the thought processes are being formed. Our brains are actually setting up these networks and, sort of world visions and ways of thinking, basically, by what we hear from other people, especially when we take them as teachers or as role models or as influencers. So when you watch a YouTube video and you like a YouTube video because of the discourse, you're actually taking on the methodology and the ideology and the sort of worldview of that person behind the video, whether it's individual or it's just a voiceover, but that's what you're taking on. So we don't take our knowledge from YouTube videos seriously. It's very dangerous. Obviously, if it's someone from that has recordings online, good. But if it's from a random person, you need to understand what their angle is in life. Why are they making these videos for? What is their purpose behind them? And a lot of it, guess what it's for? Guess? Fame. Yeah, good. Fame. That's what it's for. It's not even for knowledge. It's just for fame. So guess what? You will get in your life. You'll start wanting fame as well, because that's what passes on to you. The intention of the person behind the delivery, the instruction of knowledge, is what passes on to you. That's one of the things that is knowledge, right? That's actually what knowledge is, who you sit with. So if you sit with people of sincerity, they'll pass on the sincerity to you within their teaching. If you sit with people of generosity, they'll pass on generosity onto you within their sitting with them and learning any subject. It doesn't have to be learning generosity. It could be learning Aqidah, fiqh, maths, English, science. Your teachers at school influenced you in all the different subjects more than the subject they taught. Some of them influenced you in the way you think, the things you like, the subjects you want to do well in, etc. They inspired you, right? That's what it's about. It's about building that relationship with those people. And the people we have to build the relationship with is those that are connected back to the source of knowledge, like we said at the beginning, which is ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. via the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and via Jibreel Islam, and that link back to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam. Hence why we always quote this hadith of knowledge is actually the legacy of the prophets. right? The mirath, right? The warathul ilm, they left behind knowledge. So it was their property. You know, when we pass away, Allah give you long, healthy lives, but once we leave this world, and those who left this world, what they leave behind was theirs in this life. They owned it. They had right to, use it, let's say, in this life. Once they left it behind, they pass it on to those who have a right to take it from them, right? Those who have a connection to them, family connections, family ties. So who are the ones that are going to take knowledge then? Because the knowledge was defined for us. It's the legacy of the prophets. It's something they have when they were with us on this planet, on the face of this earth, interacting with their companions and the people around them. Who's going to take it on? The ones that have a connection to them, not everyone. So the people that met the Prophet ﷺ and they didn't believe in him, right? They didn't want to accept him, or they didn't surrender to him, or didn't sit with him to learn with him, etc. So they didn't take on the knowledge. They didn't fulfill the conditions, the prerequisites of taking on knowledge, which we've talked about. Really, we've been through that introduction of some of the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. Those that did were this learned Sahaba, and the Sahaba in general, of course, right? They all learned something, and they all passed something on, some more than others. And that's the case. Some will acquire more, some will acquire less. It's like it's like generally when inheritance occurs, or the distribution of the estate occurs, people get different amounts due to the level of connection they have with the muwarrith, as they call it, the deceased, right? The bequeather, or the one that's left everything behind. Close relatives will get more. Further distant relatives will get less, or get nothing, because it depends on your connection, who's around. Similarly, who got the most from the Prophet ﷺ was Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, with the close companions, right? The famous hadith, Ana Madinatul Ilm, I am the city of knowledge, wa Aliyun Babuha, and Sayyidina Ali is the door to this city, right? He attained great knowledge from the Prophet ﷺ. The hadith is discussed over its authenticity, and majority of scholars classify it as sound, a hasan, a good, sound hadith. But these are the people that were the primary sources of knowledge, and then so forth. They passed it on from generation to generation. So what really knowledge is a trust both ways. It's been entrusted to us, but we have to trust the person giving it to take it. You have to trust the teacher, that teacher is conveying to you what the previous teacher conveyed to you, what he conveyed from his previous teacher, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. And they have the same relationship with you. They're trusting you to uphold the same morals and etiquettes and standards and Islamic tradition, the traditionalist Islamic culture that was of that original early Muslim generations, and then pass that on, and not just water it down or modernize it, or make it more palatable for the masses, as we see today. Certain groups are giving all sorts of fatwas, watering down everything, liberalism, this kind of thing, right? It's getting dangerous, and we're losing our foundations of our deen. People are losing, unfortunately, the foundations, because they just don't know where to stand and where it's all about. So this is the big sort of danger we're in today. To contextualize all this, right? We want to learn this knowledge, but where is it from? How do we get there? We have to go back to the tradition, back to the hadith, back to the Quran, and back to the ulama. The connection is the ulama. We have to trust the ulama, right? And this is very, very important. And that's why, if you look at the early scholars, when they narrated the hadith, they actually, I don't know how to put it, but observed, let's say, rather than use anything negative, but they really observed and judged their teachers. It was both ways. We're the new generation now, right? I'm still 21, as I always say, right? And we are now looking up to our elders, right? We have to, obviously, we respect them, we honor them, we love them, but we have so many elders around us, right? So many different people. So who do we take from, and who do we trust, and so forth? Tomorrow will be the other way around. We'll have something that people might want to trust us and take from us. At the same time, they're looking at us and thinking, right, these are the next generations, we need to educate them. And we're looking at our youngsters as well. We're looking at them and saying, right, we need to educate these young people, so when they grow up, they're confident Muslims, they understand the etiquettes, the manners, the morals, the values of Islam and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And again, at the end of last week, we talked about that as well, that at the end of time, they'll come the ghuraba, the strangers, right? Islam began as something strange, it will return as something strange. And then glad tidings to the strangers. So if it's strange to do something today, and that's what Islam is, then that's what the Prophet taught. That's why he, predicted his prophecy, right? He told us that's a sign of the end, that it will become strange again. So if you find it strange to be a Muslim, people find it strange, then that's not actually a blemish. That's actually what we should be expecting in today's day and age. Not unfortunately, just that's life, reality. Let's face it, and let's deal with it. Let's work with it, inshallah. Let's be confident in ourselves. So that's really just a bit of a digression, but it's really related to this whole topic today of not just how much should I study, but where do I get my knowledge from, and how do I make sure it's sound. So it works both ways, like we said, and we need to ask Allah. The biggest. So the other question will now be, what are the criteria? The biggest criteria you have is dua. Open-mindedness and dua. If you're genuinely seeking the truth with an open mind, being biased or, this ta'assub, which, you call this like, staunchness in following a particular path or way. You have a genuinely open mind and you turn to Allah to guide you, even from, non-Muslims to Islam or non-Muslims to anywhere, you'll be guided to the truth. So if a non-Muslim, person just asks Allah for true guidance, I'm sure Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to that and will guide that person to Islam. And if you want true guidance, then turn to Allah. That's the biggest, that's the most, the most able or, most fruitful approach we could ever have is to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything. And this is one of the most important things you'd ever ask for, is true guidance and sincerity and finding the right people. But ultimately it'll be towards people. You won't find it in books. Allah won't send you to books to find the truth. Allah won't send you to, YouTube videos, right? Yeah, they have inspiration in them. Sometimes, I heard this YouTube video. I do believe it. People do say that. Alhamdulillah, it may be the case because there is truth on YouTube as well. By the way, YouTube in itself, like all, media, right? Things that we use to convey messages today, is not in of itself evil or bad. I explained this before. It's what it's used for. The internet at large, technology, whatever it's developed into today, and the developments we have, the science, wherever it's reached, is not bad. It just depends what it's used for. If it's used for good, then it's good. You get the reward of using it for good. And if it's used for evil or spreading evil, then it's going to have that consequence for those who use it that way in the akhirah. So yeah, YouTube isn't bad in of itself. I would say majority of it is full of bad, right? And there's a little bit of good on it, and that's why it's dangerous, right? You go on YouTube and you look at videos and you think they're guiding you, or they think they're nice, and it might be non-Muslims discussions you listen to. And there's another point to mention here as well about the non-Muslim side of things, is that we don't take our guidance from non-Muslims, but that doesn't mean they haven't got good in them, right? The Prophet actually said that the al-hikmatu dallatul mu'min, that wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he picks it up. But there's a problem as well. People misunderstand the hadith. So they say, yeah, you can learn. Obviously, we go to non-Muslims to learn all our lives, right? It's not a problem. But people think, oh, look, the hadith legitimizes it, that you can go and learn from people, etc. But they forget that the Prophet said that wisdom is the lost property of whom? Of the believer, al-mu'min, not of anybody. So what is a mu'min? Somebody of faith, a Muslim who has faith. When the Prophet said, you don't believe until you love for your brother what you love for yourself, he was referring to complete iman. When the Prophet is talking here about the mu'min, he's talking about a learned person, because you don't even go and learn from other people when you are learned yourself, when you can decipher between truth and falsehood, when you have a firm standing in your own faith and you know who you are and your identity, then you can look at other people. And of course, alhamdulillah, the ulama did. Imam Ghazali is the prime example of that. He went and delved into the other traditions better than them, people of that tradition themselves. And he then came back and explained what's right and wrong with those traditions, right? But we're not Imam Ghazali. And, we're all believers, alhamdulillah, we have faith, but we're not complete believers. And here doesn't necessarily mean, just iman. It means a nature of understanding, of discernment, of critical thinking, of critique. And that, I don't think that exists in today's day and age. No offense to anybody. But, we don't think in the way, we don't critique. We just hear something, a flimsy tweet or a YouTube video, like we said, and it becomes, written in gold. This is a rule for life. Who said that? Where is it from? Is it even true? How do we now take our knowledge? It's very flippant. It's very sort of, it really is like a mediocre level, superficial, let's call it, level of, acquiring knowledge. And there's no depth. Honestly, there's no depth left in what we learn today. School, education systems have become seriously watered down. And where the strength lies is to go back to the religious traditions, and not just the Islamic religious tradition, to be honest. Even the Christian and the Jewish traditions are very strong. They're very, very deep in their learning. Those that go through traditional studies in the proper way, not these part-time Darul Nizami courses you see flying around the UK, but real full-time education, both in, like, let's give you an example, the Vatican, for instance, right? Sheikh Faisal, may Allah bless him, from Canada, they visited us here at Guidance Hub. They said they went to the Vatican. I was shocked. They talked about the Vatican for about 20 minutes because it was really amazing. They are learning Islam to PhD level in the Vatican. Right, they are dissecting Islam inside out. They know more than Islam than most Muslims probably. Like some of the people, obviously, they're speciality, and they've got faculties in many subjects, many fields. It's not just Islam, but everything. Right, that's not a secular tradition. It's not a government. Although the Vatican is a state in itself, right? But it's actually a religious-based state, right? And look at the depth of knowledge and study they provide for their, citizens or whatever, right? And they told us about their money-making process as well. Like they charged them €50 to go into their Vatican City at certain areas, right? And they were speaking to the people and it says like 50,000 people go through here a day and they pay €50. So look at the money they're making there as well, right? So, the Sheikh then said, imagine asking people to pay 50 quid to do tawaf. Obviously, we can't do that, but imagine that. That's what they're kind of doing. And he obviously saw it firsthand. He was reporting it firsthand, and the Sheikh stayed there for several days and was honoured, obviously, as a guest there and met the Pope, etc., etc. Right? That's a secondary thing, right? But the point I want to make from that is the level of knowledge in religious traditions is very deep and very sound and very powerful. It really educates, We all want to send our children to the best schools, the grammar schools, right? The private schools, right? We know the knowledge in our normal public school is not as high quality, the teaching levels, the student-to-teacher ratios, right, etc. And the same applies everywhere. It's not that good. The real elite knowledge is, either you pay for it or you struggle for it, right? For instance, the Islamic tradition now, if you went to somewhere like Mauritania, you'd get the highest caliber of Islamic learning ever. Right? One of the highest calibers around the world. But then are you going to live in a desert in a tent? Because that's what Mauritania is, right? Syria wasn't too bad when I was there, right? We just lived in an apartment and, it was basic stuff. But alhamdulillah, it was fine. It was actually quite, economical living, right? We didn't spend more than maybe, if you're single, probably like £200 a month, that's it. You don't need to live on that. Rent and food and travel, etc. And if you're married, probably like £500 a month. It's a bit more expensive for married couples, etc., depending on their standard of living, of course. But we struggled through the little struggles we had, alhamdulillah, and we devoted our times to going to the masajid and learning from the scholars and the classes, etc. And that everywhere you went, I think I mentioned it before, maybe that every mosque had classes. Fajr, Zohar, Isha, Maghrib, there's classes of fiqh, Aqidah, Arabic language, the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the Quranic tajweed, all these kind of things. So it was all there, alhamdulillah. But yeah, let's go back to this, right? But that's very important what we've just discussed there. So going on to that third category of what is good in its sufficient amount. This is basically, Imam Ghazali says, is furudul kifayat. Everything that's a fard kifaya, we need to learn it to a sufficient amount. Obviously, learning it to a good intermediate amount, a reasonable level, is better and is more productive for us and is praiseworthy. But then spending, and he mentions here, spending all your life on a fard kifaya and going after it is for the masses, no. Obviously, we need specialists in certain areas, yes. But we don't need everybody to be a scholar. No, not everybody needs to be a scholar. No, we don't need everybody to be a physician, everyone to be a engineer. No. In Syria, because obviously I spent several years there, everybody was a dentist. I'm telling you, you walk down the road, you saw 20 surgeries, like dentist. I'm not joking, it was crazy. I told you my friend, he went to Syria, he's a dentist as well, and he actually put down in his visa when he went that he's going to practice dentistry. He goes, oh, there's no jobs for dentistry from abroad. He goes, no, I'm going to volunteer. He goes, we don't need volunteers. We don't need, and he goes, okay, I'm going as a tourist. He goes, oh, you can come as a tourist. He was coming as a tourist anyway, but he just thought he'd put something different down. But yeah, so they don't want that there. Why? Because there was a time where that was the culture, that was what was promoted, and everybody started studying medicine and dentistry, etc. And there's just a crazy. By the way, these surgeries are opening and closing left, right, centre because they don't get no people. I mean, it's a just saturated market. If you've got on one street 10 dentists, and the next street 10 dentists, next street, how many people need to see the dentist? Subhanallah. So we don't need everybody to be, and that's a practical example I saw in my life, right? I saw that firsthand, that we don't all need to be dentists. But there was a time, for whatever reasons, in the social, political scene in Syria, that everybody went down this route of dentistry, right? There must have been a reason for it or whatever, and it resulted in a lack of need for dentists really, and over kind of there's a lot of need for other kind of areas and stuff, right? And that's the balance we need in society. Some people need to do certain jobs, other people need other jobs, like we need teachers, we need
was it ever regulated historically, like the Tumi ulama?
I don't think you can regulate it. Society can choose what to do, but there's obviously a limited amount of roles available everywhere. So once the roles are fulfilled, I do think that the leadership would have pushed, like they are now, they're pushing more people to become teachers. They're putting extra sort of tax cut or tax benefits and all that on teachers, because teachers need more teachers. But the problem is nobody wants to teach after teaching. It's the most gone into job, people most left job I've read about. The job that people leave the most is teaching. Allah bless the teachers, may Allah preserve the teachers. But it's a hard job. Obviously in public school it's a different scenario. I mean, in other scenarios people love teaching, but in the general world in the UK, teaching is pretty tough, depending on what school you're at, etc. The demands and etc. Right? So, yeah, they're trying to balance that out here, but it might not be working, right? Allah knows the best. So that's the third category. So we've got three categories now, and then Imam Ghazali actually starts talking about particulars. So he actually starts delving into the whole concept of, okay, what should I study then, right? In terms of fiqh, in terms of aqidah, in terms of the subjects. So let's read what Imam Ghazali says, and let's learn those things, so then make your plan for your life. I'm not going to tell you exactly what to do, but you definitely should be doing something around these lines. So he says, take care to see that you are not occupied in improving others before improving yourself. This is the line I've highlighted because I want to mention it, start from here, this point. Take care to see that you are not occupied in improving others before improving yourself. You do islahun nafs, islah meaning correction, rectification of yourself, before you try and sort other people out, right? If you can't swim, can you be a lifeguard? Go and try somebody, Binny, go and try to save somebody in the and we know what happened, right? Both of you would go down. Binny can't swim. Sorry, Shiraz. But he jumped in the river when we went on our retreat, mashallah, and then we had to pull him out. We had a life jacket on, so it was more for the buzz, alhamdulillah. We recorded it as well. We've still got it on recording. But it was a good retreat, by the way. So he couldn't swim, so we wouldn't expect Shiraz to be the lifeguard. Other brothers were there saving him, right? So he wasn't going to drown or anything, it was just fun. But that's the thing, if you don't have a skill yourself, or you're not able to do something for yourself, how on earth can you do it for anybody else? But swimming is probably, very clear, vivid example. But even in this, like helping others in the deen, or, rectifying yourself and others, you have to do it for yourself first. So he says, be occupied with yourself, busy yourself, with that knowledge which is your particular duty. So everyone has like I said, their own journey in this, according to your circumstances, i.e. worship. So obviously that's the first thing we always mention. So I need to pray, ablution, wudu, ghusl, fard of praying, right? Obviously when it comes to fasting, the month of Ramadan, if you fulfill the conditions, do I fulfill the conditions? Yes, you do. Then you have to fast, zakat, and all obviously the pillars come first. But all the things that are necessary, and obviously one of the major things which is neglected, which Imam Ghazali makes a point of, he says, surely the most important thing which all neglect, which everyone neglects, is knowledge of the attributes of the heart. So rectification of the inner. Those that are praiseworthy and those that are blameworthy. The good traits and the bad traits. Knowledge of them and the purification from the evil traits and the acquisition of the good traits. For no man is without some blameworthy attributes, such as envy, hypocrisy, conceit, and the like. All of them are destructive, and to neglect them, along with occupation in external acts, whilst being external acts, resembles being busy and rubbing ointments on the surface of the body when one suffers from the itch and boils, and failing when suffering from the itch and boils, and you obviously, you're busy with the outward, and failing to draw out what's inside by taking away the disease, the virus, the bloodletting, it says here, because that's what will cure you. So you can constantly scratch at the symptoms, right, and the outward problems. You think you're doing good, but there's an internal process required as well. Those whose knowledge is superficial advise to do the external acts Just as quack doctors, I've got a translation here, advise one to smear the surface of his body with ointments, etc. The scholars of the Akhirah only advise one to purify the inner and cut off the substance of the evil influences that are destroying your inner body, right, and uprooting its origins from the heart. And most people resort to external deeds instead of purifying the heart. So we think that it's outwardly only, right? It's actually, there's a lot more to work on internally. But there's an effort required, right? He says here, because external acts are easy, while acts of the heart are difficult. Just as one finds it difficult to drink bitter medicine and takes refuge in smearing the surface. Oh, don't worry about the medicine, this little thing will do, right? I don't want to do that procedure. Yeah, doctor, will this work? Yeah, that'll work as well. It'll cover up the pain for a few weeks, but I'll do that instead. So we'd rather take the easy way out because we can't take the bitterness of some of the medicine that's administered to us. Similarly, purifying the inner is that bitterness we've got to go through and we've got to struggle through. So then he mentions, and this is why I want to read this part in itself. He says, but if you desire the next abode and seek salvation and wish to flee from everlasting destruction, busy yourself in knowledge of the inner maladies and their remedy, as we have presented in the quarter of the muhlikat. Right, we told you about this early on, that the Ihya Ulumuddin is 40 books. It's printed in several volumes, but if you look, there's a book 1, book 2, book 3. Book 1 is book of knowledge, book 2 is book of beliefs, book 3 is the worship, acts of worship, etc. It goes through them. So that's the first quarter is on the outward acts. The second quarter is on outward acts of worship. The second quarter with a few introductory parts, right? The second quarter is on the habits, things that we do in normal life, right? Everyday things, traveling, food, drink, eating, du'as related to that, how they can all become spiritually enhanced and what we should be doing in those things, or what is the purpose of those acts. And then the third quarter is the destructive factors. The third, books 21 to 30 are the muhlikat, things that will destroy you, and their remedies. So envy is in there, right? Breaking desires are in there, attachment to this world is in there, anger is in there, and so forth, right? So Imam Ghazali is telling you that's what you need to learn about, right? Then, without doubt, that will draw you to the praiseworthy stations mentioned in the quarter on the munjiyat. So after the final quarter, books 31 to 40, are the munjiyat. So muhlikat were the destructive factors, destructive things. The munjiyat are the it says here, to the praiseworthy stations, which the quarter on the things that save, munjiyat, right? Things that cause salvation and your well-being in the akhirah. Your well-being in the akhirah, and it's more the internal that Imam Ghazali talks about in that section. And this is something very important, right? So where can we do this? How do we do this? Alhamdulillah, we're going to give you an amazing opportunity. This Saturday coming up, we're starting a unit. It's one of the popular units as well from the sign-up so far, called The Devil's Trap. In that unit, we're going to talk about the quarter on the things that harm. Envy, hatred, major sins, tawbah and getting out of them, all sorts of things like that we're going to be talking about. And that's a unit, 10-week unit we have on Saturdays. There are other units as well, but this one's related exactly to that quarter on. It's based on that Imam Ghazali's works, by the way. He's got other works, Bidayat al-Hidayah, Minhaj al-Abidin and other works, but based on them, put them together, and sections from the Ihya Ulumuddin. We're going to be talking about major sins. We're going to be talking about envy, talking about hatred, arrogance, anger, these kind of destructive factors in our lives and how to deal with them and cope with them, and etc. We finished on Saturday. We talked about the praiseworthy characteristics. So we kind of be doing that in our courses. So if you do want to get to do this, don't have to wait till the end, like 5 years time when we get to the last sections. You can actually attend these classes, inshallah, on Saturdays. And that's our goal, by the way, at Isnad. What is Isnad? It's our education branch, Islamic education. That's what it's designed for, really. It's designed for what Imam Ghazali is talking about right here, that our foundation classes are for everything that you need to learn of your beliefs, of your practices, of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, of spirituality, etiquettes, manners, the inner diseases, the inner good traits. We've got Islamic history, things that will help you to understand the context of our deen and iman and help you grow. And we've got even a unit on the Quran, which is also going to be this Saturday, on the short surahs and what they mean and what we're reciting in our prayers. The whole idea of the foundation level of Isnad is to give every single Muslim what they need, what they must study, not just the outward things, everything, the inward and outward, based on what Imam Ghazali is telling us right here. So basically we're just kind of showing you our thought process in our courses is from what Imam Ghazali and other scholars, of course, have mentioned over history. And then it says, when the heart is emptied of blameworthy attributes, i.e. it is filled with the praiseworthy. If the earth is cleansed of weeds, various kinds of sweet-smelling flowers and plants will spring out of it, right? If you don't remove the filth in something, the goodness can't be shown. The filth will always overpower it. Right? Even one drop of urine in a glass, the water is not worth anything, right? We're not going to touch that from a mile away. So this is what we need to remove the vices, the evil things, to allow the beauty to come forth, right? And that's more important. We've said a few times in other classes as well. Removing evil takes precedence over, bringing about good. Removal of harm takes precedence over bringing benefit. This is a principle we have in our religion. Of course, we try to do both, but what takes precedence in a clash or in what's more important? Removing harm, right? Daf'ul mafsada or daf'ul mafasid awla min jalbil masalih. It's one of our maxims of our religion, how we work in this religion. It's based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, La darara wa la dirar. There is no harming and no reciprocating harm. Harm is removed. Harm is the lesser of harm, we should take for a removal of great harm. There's many principles derived. One of them is removal of harm takes precedence over bringing about any benefit, right? We're not supposed to harm others. And then Imam Ghazali gives an example of someone who is, says here, how great is the foolishness of the one under whose clothes are snakes and scorpions, have crept, and is intent on killing him, So there's scorpions under your garments, right? Sorry to scare you. While he himself is searching for a fly squatter to wave away flies and stuff from other people, and not even from himself. And those people can't help him, let alone help themselves. So what kind of foolishness is this, right? If you want to help other people from, flies, and then you yourself haven't even killed those snakes and scorpions, meaning your vices and the evil deeds inside of you, work on yourself. Really important to work on yourself. So when you have finished improving yourself and you have become able to forsake the outer inner sin, and that has become a habit and a custom for you, you're able to now control yourself, you've got discipline, and how remote that is from you, right? How far that way is. Then engage in the general obligations and pay attention, the fard kifayat, general obligation is the translation of fard kifayat. So basically what Imam Ghazali is saying is don't study anything further. What first is your obligations that apply to you. So let's go into a bit more detail about that. Of course, you mentioned prayer, purification, beliefs, okay, tajweed, correct pronunciation of the salah in particular, but the Quran in general is a fard and it's required, it's not optional. Yes, there are dispensations or, because it's difficult, then your prayer is valid, but it's not a good prayer. Okay, people think, the fatwa is that, if you don't get the pronunciation correct, which is true, your prayer is still valid. It is, correct pronunciation does not affect the validity of the prayer in most circumstances. Of some circumstances, it will affect the validity of prayer, and that's definitely what you should learn. But everyone should know that the perfection of the prayer and the real prayer that's going to stand a worthiness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to have everything complete in it, the inner, the outer, the prostration, the bowing. We talk about how to perfect those things, and it's important. We also need to talk about how to perfect the pronunciation of every single part of the prayer. And it's not a lot, if we learn for the sake of salah, it'll be a great, intention, a great act. If we learn for the sake of the Quran, what a noble act, right? The Prophet said, the one who learns the Quran and stutters, he's got double reward, finds it difficult. The one who finds it easy and is good at it, the angels are with him, right? The best of you are those who learn the Quran and teach the Quran. The best, right? So Quran shouldn't be neglected in all of this, right? This is very, very important that we attach ourselves to the Quran, the recitation of the Quran, the understanding of the Quran, but recitation comes first. The understanding is what Imam Ghazali mentions after. This is not an absolute obligation initially. Recitation is the first obligation. Pronunciation is the first individual obligation. Learning the meanings is something secondary. Important. All the other sciences are important, not diminishing their worth. But you have to have, your priorities set right. So in terms of priorities, recitation is of utter importance. We can't neglect that. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, it's getting worse and worse. And it's not difficult. It's application. If you from a young age, or from any age, to be honest, just apply yourself, put effort in, have a bit of patience, perseverance, you'll get there. You'll improve, and that's the goal. The goal is to improve. Perfection is limited to few, but everybody can and must improve. That's something that's an obligation on everyone. And that's what they say. If you're actually learning to improve and you're improving, there's no sin or no blemish on you and you're in a good state. But if you're not even on that process of improvement, the process of trying, then you're actually in a blameworthy state. So everybody should be trying. That's the bare minimum. Yes, Adil.
Good question. Recently, I've traveled to Turkey quite a lot in Cyprus. And their recitation is pretty amazing. It's to keep to a study program.
Yep.
If you go to Syria, if you go to...
Yeah, they have very good recitation in most parts of the world.
Why those so diverged quite drastically? Why did they not...
So they do have it. So if you look, there are great Qadis from Pakistan, there are great Qadis from India, there are great teachers right now in the UK, etc. But there's a reason, I'll tell you afterwards why it went all wrong. Okay, there's a reason.
Some of the recitations are shocking.
I know, they are, and I'll explain to you why that is later. Sorry, viewers at home, that's only between me and Adil. And for yourselves as well. But if you want to know the answer, for ladies, you can speak to Sheikh Anosheen, and she'll explain to you why, and I'll explain to you, inshallah ta'ala. But yeah, so that's something to mention in there. Then there's also things that you as an individual need to know in terms of your society around you. If you're a parent, children, if you're a married spouse, your parents in themselves first and foremost, your community members, your neighbors, people have rights over us, your uncles and aunties, your colleagues at work. Every social interaction has responsibility that must be learnt, understood and applied. Your fellow Muslim in general, right? Okay, some of these things are not absolute individual obligations, but sometimes they are because it's your own family member, it's somebody very close to you. It's their janazah, for instance. Yes, janazah is fard kifaya, it's a communal obligation, but if it's your family member, Allah bless your families, but it could be your brother, sister, father, son, then you are the person who has to be there and know what to do and be leading maybe in some circumstances. So are you ready to do that? There will come a time when you need to. So we need to learn for ourselves first and foremost, and then we can help other people, yes. Then we can move on to these other sciences and look further into Islamic studies and so forth, which is what we do at Isnad as well. We understand that Muslims are keen on learning their deen and are keen on developing their understanding of faith. So we have intermediate and advanced courses, but we have a prerequisite that you must have studied all your foundational studies and you know about these prayer, purification. So we have unit on zakat. The Hajj one is starting this Saturday as well, but it's not advertised because Hajj is only for a few people, right? But zakat one we're going to advertise starting in March. We're going to have a zakat course on Saturdays in March. If you attend our courses, don't worry, you'll cover it at some point. If you don't, and those who may not know, then they can drop in for the units. We'll have a zakat unit in March. Then before Ramadan, we're going to be doing fasting, things like this. So we do the obligations first. We've talked about personal conduct, like with hygiene when you wake up, not just the purification level, but etiquettes and manners and the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and waking up, grooming yourself, looking after yourself, kind of thing. Etiquettes of leaving the home, coming home, at work with other people, personal social interactions. We've done 10-week units on all these kind of things. And try to give as much advice and guidance on the Islamic etiquette, manners and rights and responsibilities every individual has. That's in year 2. So if you're in year 1 or those listening, then it's in year 2, those units. And in year 3 now, we're going to move on year 2, the last unit we're going to move on to in terms of this topic of the self is the spiritual journey in terms of the good attributes or the positive attributes and how we need to be aware of the plots of Satan, the plots of, that's in the devil's trap somewhat as well, but also the plots of the nafs, also the obstacles on the path, your nafs being the biggest one, the dunya being one, other people being one, company, etc. So we're going to talk about how to, enhance or improve your, be successful on your journey or be fruitful at least on some of that journey and moving forward. That unit is called Reawakening the Soul. So we've got this. We hope to obviously in those 2 years. It's not sufficient, to be honest. We could go for many years, but we hope that in that 2 years there's enough there for everyone who studied with Isnad to know what they need to practice as a Muslim confidently. Obviously, we don't know how well people are going to learn, understand, retain the information and the knowledge, but we hope that everyone who attends does practice what they learn, inshallah ta'ala. Then Imam Ghazali moves on, so I'm going to quickly summarize now to the stuff that you don't need to know. Then he goes, you move on to the sciences. It's good to learn, tafsir, nasikh mansukh, the muhkamat ayat, the mutashabit ayat, and the, etc. The subsidiary sciences, like usul fiqh kind of thing, usul hadith. He says, but do not engross yourself in one of these arts in the hope of fathoming it, for knowledge is voluminous and his life is short. These sciences are instruments and preliminaries. Logic is one of them. Language, nahu, grammar. But he does say, learn them if you want to learn them to understand the Quran. Learn them to understand the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, to understand the rulings of fiqh. It says, in grammar, be content with what concerns the book and usage, book of Allah and the usage. In exposition, tafsir, in jurisprudence, fiqh, and in theology, kalam, in order that they may be compared with them. So learn grammar to access those knowledge sciences. And then give an example of a tafsir. When you go to tafsir, then you can learn, he says, what is this? So these three levels we talked about earlier, the sufficient amount, the praiseworthy amount, middle amount, let's call it, and then the excessive amount. He says for tafsir, he says to study the book Al-Wajiz of Al-Wahidi. Al-Wahidi al-Naysaburi was a great scholar of tafsir. He wrote 3 or 4 tafsirs. One was called Al-Wajiz. He wrote a big one, then he summarized it into Wajiz. Wajiz is equivalent to the Quran. So if you read the Quran and you double it, that's the Wajiz. Wajiz means brief, by the way. Then he has Wasit. Wasit means middle. So Imam Ghazali says the Wajiz is what you should really aim to learn as a Muslim. Just a basic commentary of the Quran. The Quran is, let's say 500 pages. If tafsir of 500 pages, explaining those 500 pages is good. And that's what suffices you. If you want to learn more to a good level, then it says here 3 times as much. So if you had 500 pages, read a tafsir of 1,500 pages. Anything beyond that, he says, is going to excess, which you can do without. If you're not going to become a mufassir and that's not your role in life, leave it. Just that's what you need of the Quran and its understanding. And there's no limit, he says. Obviously, tafsir, you can go on forever. And there's many, many books that are massive and voluminous. Therefore, the specialists, right? They're not for the awam. So let me go back to the point where I said it's for everyone. This is for everyone. Everyone should try to attain some level of understanding of the Quran. In terms of hadith, go to the Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim as a minimum, or that sufficient level if you want to learn hadith. If you want to learn further than the 6 books of hadith, the Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i. And if you want to go beyond that, it's excessive, right? And then he mentions fiqh, he mentions Shafi'i fiqh, and the Mukhtasar of Muzani. We could say Mukhtasar of Quduri is equivalent to that. And then he says Al-Wasit, which is his own book, is sufficient, right? We could say something like Sharh Quduri or Hidayah or Ikhtiyar is probably good like that. These are Hanafi books basically that are intermediate level or medium level. And then he goes, you can go extensively and in depth. And he's got books on that as well. Imam Ghazali had books on that level, but that's not for everyone. That's for scholars. That's not for you. That's not for the awam. If you want to go into depth, medium level book, he's given an example of basically one of his books. In theology, he studied book 2 of Ihya al-Din. He says basically, what he actually says is that the amount of theology that should be desired is as much as will preserve the articles of faith which the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which the Orthodox Muslims have transmitted, and that is all. To do more than that and to seek to unveil the real nature of things by way is not suitable. The objective in learning the Sunnah is to attain the minimum measure of it, along with faith that is in a sufficient amount. This is the amount which we have set forth in Kitab Qawa'id al-Aqa'id, which is book 2 of Ihya al-Din. So when you finish the book of knowledge, you're actually going to do a book of Aqidah. Genuinely, it's going to be an actual whole study of Aqidah of a Muslim, right? Based on the book of Imam Ghazali, Qawa'id al-Aqa'id. He says if you want to go more to that medium level, then he's got a book called Iqtisad, Al-Iqtisadu fil I'tiqad, which means the moderation in a belief, economization in believing. Moderation is probably a better word. Which has actually got a lot of detail. It's not a book for everyone. It's not a book for most people, to be honest, because it's a book that's based on this idea of debate and refutation, let's say, and understanding the other groups, particularly 2 groups, the Mu'tazilites and the Hashwiyya or Karramiyya or the Mushabbiha, the anthropomologists as they call them, right? Those who liken Allah to His creation, the ideas they have. As for the masses, right, we don't need to go into that level. The Qaid is good, to be honest. And there's other books like Aqidah Tahawiyya is like that. Other basic books have that level of, belief in them. Aqidah Sanusiyya is enough, it has that basic level in it. These are all like, literally little texts that are, you can write on an A4 piece of paper that you just need to read through, study, understand. Qawaid al-Qaid is a booklet, literally. Obviously, the book 2 of Ihya al-Ulumuddin is a commentary on that. So Qawaid al-Qaid is basically a statement of faith like Aqidah Tahawiyya. I'm sure many of you have come across Aqidah Tahawiyya. This is more or less the exact same thing. It's a statement of faith. We believe Allah is one, He's powerful, the Prophet is the final messenger, statements of faith. Allah has, no beginning, no end, etc. And then Imam Ghazali in book 2 of Ihya al-Ulumuddin, he actually commentated on his book of Aqidah, his statement of Aqidah, which is sound and obviously of orthodoxy and has been followed and studied and commentated on by other scholars actually, even after him, rahimahullah, may Allah mercy on them all. So that's what we're going to be studying not next week, next as in after Book of Knowledge, which we don't know exactly when, but maybe a few weeks' time we'll have got there, inshallah ta'ala. In short, the acceptable thing with those who know is that you consider yourself in the present world alone with Allah, while next to you is death. The day of judgment is close, the day of reckoning with the garden, the fire, right? So this is what we need to, this is how we should be living our lives, right? This initial, very beginning we said that knowledge is not just all these different things. Knowledge is what? The knowledge that is of the heart, or the knowledge that is all of its praiseworthy, is that which brings you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a summary. And he mentions some statements here which I just want to, or some stories I just want to quote before we finish. It says one of the shuyukh was seen in a dream once, learned man of course. And he said, what's the news regarding those subjects, sciences, discussions, everything you did, right? فَقَالَ لَهُ مَا خَيْرُ تِلْكَ الْعُلُومِ. What was the good of all the knowledge? الَّتِي كُنْتَ تُجَادِلُ فِيهَا وَتُنَاظِرُ عَلَيْهَا. Used to debate and discuss and etc. And he said actually, he blew in his hand, he stretched out his hand and he blew it away. What does it say here? He said it has all gone with the wind, right? Literally, obviously blew it away, but he said all gone with the wind, nothing, it's dust basically. And the only thing that I got benefit from was 2 rakats which I performed fi wasat al-layl, in the middle of the night, at night. But here's the condition: khalusata. They were 2 units of prayer that I found some sincerity in. That's all that benefited me on the Day of Judgment. All them discussions and intellectual kind of discourse, etc., was of no fruit. What benefited me was 2 rakats, not even just 2 rakats that I found some ikhlas in them in one particular night. That's what actually had benefit for me in the next life. In a tradition, it's a hadith well known. It says, "Ma dalla qawmun ba'da hudan kanu alayhi illa utul jadal." That people have not erred after guidance, have not been misguided or gone astray after guidance, except that they were given jadal. What is jadal? Argumentation. The fancy term for it is polemics. When you discuss this, that you argue, debate, this kind of thing. This is a sign of a group going astray. They have guidance, alhamdulillah, but when they're given to argumentation and etc., that's a sign of being astray, going astray. And that's not good. Generally, debate and discussion in that level of argumentation is disliked for everyone, including scholars. It's haram for the Imam, to be honest. You're not supposed to debate about the religion. You should leave it to the learned, and even for the learned, it's not recommended. Then he recited, they surely mentioned it to you only to dispute. Nay, they are contentious people. Right? ثم قرأ ما ضربوه لك إلا جدلا بل هم قوم خصمون. They are people who are argumentative, contentions. In traditions about the meaning of the verse, as for those in whose heart there is a tendency to err, which is the ayahs we talked about last week, the ayat of the mutashabihat, right, which are as follows. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب. He is the one that sent upon you the book. Minhu ayatun muhkamat. In it are clear, decisive ayat. Hunna ummul kitab. They are the source of the book. Wa ukharu mutashabihat. And there are other ayat which are mutashabihat, ambiguous. فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ زَيْغٌ. This is what Imam Ghazali quotes. As for the ones in whose hearts there is zayghun, tendency to err, deviancy. فَيَتَّبِعُونَ مَا تَشَابَهَ مِنْهُ. They follow what is tashabaha minhu, ambiguous, not clear within it. They don't follow the muhkamat. They want to follow the mutashabihat. Ibtigha al-fitna, desiring therein fitna, discord, trials. وَابْتِغَاءَ تَأْوِيلِهِ, and to seek an interpretation for these ayat. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ, and nobody knows the interpretation except Allah. And then you can either stop or carry on, but if you stop, we'll say وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ آمَنَّا بِهِ كُلُّ مِنْ عِنْدِ رَبِّنَا, and those firmly established, endowed in knowledge, they say, we believe in all of it, all of it is from our Lord. وَمَا يَذَّكَّرُ إِلَّا أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ, and no one truly is reminded, takes benefit, takes heed, except those who have deep knowledge of people of the core. We talked about deep knowledge, we talked about these skins and the outer knowledge and the inner. The people of deep knowledge really understand what Allah is talking about. That's ayah number 7 of Surah. Ayah number 7 of Surah Al-Imran. So Surah 3, ayah number 7. That is referred. The dua is the dua after it. رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا وَهَبْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْوَهَّابُ. Oh Allah, do not cause our hearts to go astray after you have guided us, and grant us from yourself a mercy. Surely you are the one, the most oft forgiving, the most gifting, the most generous. رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ جَامِعُ النَّاسِ لِيَوْمٍ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Oh Allah, O our Lord, you are the one who will gather the people on a day in which there is no doubt. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ. Surely Allah does not breach His promise. يُخْلِفُ, doesn't break His promise, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam Ghazali is telling us, look, avoid this. In Aqidah, obviously talking about now, avoid this, don't go down that route. One of the learned said, in the latter days there will be people against whom the door of deeds will be bolted, and the door of argumentation, polemics will be opened. Right? No worship, all talk, all this kind of thing. In one of the traditions, khabar, we find you are in a time in which you are inspired to act, and there will come a people who will be inspired to dispute. In another also tradition, these are not quoted as hadith here, just traditions. The most hated by Allah is he who is the most vehement in contention, in argumentation. While another report says, logic is given to a people only to hinder their good works. Right? Al-jadlu fil khayri khabari abghadu al-khalqi ila Allah ta'ala alad al-khasm. ما أوتي قوم المنطق إلا منع العمل والله أعلم. A people were not given mantiq except that they were stopped from acting. Right? So this logical, theoretical knowledge, it sounds good, it makes you feel good, it sounds amazing, but it doesn't have any fruits. It's just theory, it's just talk. We need to have action with. We need to have it. Imam Ghazali is not saying don't have that, don't need that. But he's saying that's for an elite group. Let them deal with it. You believe in them, you support them, and that the question might be then, but isn't ignorance of something a danger, right? And this is something I'll finish with, as Imam Ghazali himself points this out. He says, let me get this right. This is the next section, really. But we'll mention it because it's very important. We'll talk about this next week. So next week's topic is basically accepting following Imam Ghazali. Basically, that's what it is. He says, and actually it's in this section. Sorry, just before I jumped over the page. He says here, many a time someone is heard to utter the following words: "People are enemies of that which they are ignorant." Right? So you're going to fight logic and intellectual discussions because you're ignorant of it. You should learn it. Why are you being ignorant of it? Do not think that. Do not think that. What does Imam Ghazali use? Imam Ghazali's words. Right? We need to go back a bit. He says, فَلَا تَظُنَّ ذَلِكَ. Don't think that. فَعَلَى الْخَبِيرِ سَقَطْتَ. Because you have found a very experienced person. He's talking about himself. Right? You found a very experienced person. Accept this advice from one who has spent his whole life in it. Imam Ghazali did this, right? He went through this whole journey of fiqh and debates in fiqh and aqidah and philosophy and everything and so forth. And not only that, he's praising himself, but he's praising himself for a reason, when it's perfectly halal and allowed, and it's actually wajib, so we understand where he's coming from. He says, accept this advice from the one who has spent all his life in it. He actually wasted all his life in it. He says here, ضَيَّعَ الْأُمْرَ فِيهِ وَزَادَ فِيهِ. So he says, and outstripped his predecessors in respect to writing, investigating, argumentating, and proving all these things. And that's the case. Imam Ghazali became the most learned, if not one of the most, if not the most learned of his time. Then, inspiring him to think aright, Allah made him see his fault and forsake it. Talking about himself. So Allah inspired me to realize all this what I'm doing is not for the right reason. Then, look what he did. Then he worked by himself. By himself, it says here, وَاشْتَغَلَ بِنَفْسِهِ. وَاشْتَغَلَ بِنَفْسِهِ, he worked on himself. Like, اشْتَغَلَ بِنَفْسِهِ means to busy yourself with your own, concern yourself with yourself, right? Think about your own state. Then he worked by himself, i.e. on himself. And do not be deceived by the words of the one who says, the legal opinion is the pillar of the law and its hidden defects only known by knowledge of apologetics and these kind of discussions, debates and so forth. فلا يغرنك قول من يقول الفتوى عماد شرعي ولا يعرف علله إلا بعلم الخلاف disputation فإن علل المذهب مذكورة في المذهب وزيادة عليها مجادلات. Because there's enough in the books, the discussions of all the fine discussions are within the books. You don't need to go into argumentation and into polemics, really is the word we're looking for. And then he mentions here that the early generations had no polemics. And they knew fatwa better than anybody. They knew the aqidah better than anybody. You didn't find them having these debates and breaking down these points and going into these discussions. And they are the strongest of iman about everyone. So this is who we need to follow and stick to, and not follow that trap of, oh, you should learn it. It's nice to learn. Look, Imam Ghazali telling you, I've been down there. It's not good for you. Talking to the masses here, right? Of course, there'll be individuals that might be an exception to the rule, but there are conditions for that exception to the rule, right? You've got to be Imam Ghazali if you want to be an exception to the rule, right? If you're him, fine, do what he did. He was strong, he wasn't affected. He actually, refuted and, was actually strong in actually the Islamic discourse side of things, right? And he had his opinions and he wrote his books in many categories or fields, which shows his expertise, right? So if you're not at that level, and Imam Ghazali is advising you, please stay away. Put your attention to what concerns you in life and avoid, he says actually avoid the shayateen of jinn and shayateen of ins, shaitans from jinn and shaitans from human beings, and avoid ulama as-su, the evil scholars who lead people astray, who do this, who do that, who want a following, he says here, right? What they want is following, and they only get a following by criticizing others and putting others down and having this kind of thing, right? So this is something very, very important that we need to avoid, inshallah ta'ala, right? We don't want to be bogged down in this kind of thing, right? We don't want to be people of ulama as-su, as it says here, right? This is something very, very bad. And then he moves on to the polemics and the disputations and what we talked about. So we'll finish there, and then we'll move on to that whole idea next week. So the next section, it's a new section, is here, it says part 4 here. It says Al-Bab al-Rabi' fi sababi iqbal al-khalqi ala ilm al-khilaf. Why do people want to debate, basically, and khilaf is more like polemics or disputes, not more than debates. وتفصيل آفات المناظرة, and elucidation into the drawbacks or the defects, the problems with debating. والجدل, polemics, argumentation. And the conditions for it being allowed. So this is now a topic that obviously Imam Ghazali mentioned. It was rife at his time. It was out there, and even today's day and age, you see it now. It's out there. This is Imam Ghazali's guidance next week on this topic, inshallah ta'ala. So we'll stop there for today. We've gone a bit over, but we just wanted to cover that section, and we'll talk about that next week, inshallah ta'ala. So any questions at this point are welcome. One from either side. I'm sorry to limit it, but the time is short. Any questions, ladies, first? But both can be from this side. 2 questions. No? Okay. And this side? No? Okay. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next week, inshallah ta'ala. And do not forget that Saturday we have new courses starting, new units starting. If you can come on Saturdays, please do check them out on our website, guidancehub.org. And it'd be nice to see you enroll on these courses. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.